Hello there, welcome in if you're new here. If you're not, welcome back. I'm Molly and I'm very excited today because I am sharing my review of the PlayStation Access controller. PlayStation very kindly sent me 2 of these ahead of release to try out and experiment and make content with, and I'm very excited. So thank you so much to PlayStation for sending these over. I'm very grateful. If you do not know what this is the brand new PlayStation Access controller coming out on the 6th of December. It is a brand new piece of hardware, brand new controller made with disabled gamers in mind, and that's wonderful. We need more of that. A little bit of background on me and my disability. I have a connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and it basically, one of the main symptoms I get from it, among other stuff, is a lot of pain in my bones, my skin, my joints, my nerves. Any part of me that could hurt usually does. And so I really struggle with traditional controllers, and so I was so excited to be sent a couple of these to try out and see if it helped with my pain and be able to do a review for you guys. I already did an unboxing of the controllers, which is up on my channel. I'll link it somewhere. However, if you didn't see it, I'll quickly go over a recap of like what you get in the box. In each box, you get one access controller, and you also get a whole box full of custom paddles or buttons, whatever you want to call them, and also custom analog sticks. You get like a variety of buttons. You also get a USB-C cable included with each controller, and then you get 2 options of different joysticks or analog sticks, and then you get a third one, the default on the actual controller itself. You also get a big old strip of all the customizable buttons that you would want on your PlayStation controller, so that you can choose, basically, so you can signify what button you have assigned to each button on the controller. So that is everything you get in one box. And like I said earlier, I did get sent 2 of these access controllers because you can use up to 2 and a DualSense controller at the same time. However, in this review, I only used 2 access controllers because that was all that I needed. So getting into actually talking about the controller, I've had about a week now to try them out, and I have a lot of thoughts and also like some advice along with it. I'm gonna start with the setup of the controller and just like the general features of it. And then after that, I'll go into like my review and my personal thoughts about it. First up, I mean, the actual controller itself is freaking gorgeous. Like, it is just so, it's like, you can tell it's PlayStation, you can tell it's Sony tech. It's just so nice to look at. It's almost like something you would find on a futuristic, it looks almost like something you would find on a futuristic spaceship. Love that. Controllers themselves actually come in accessible packaging, which is freaking wonderful. And I wish all packaging came like that. It had these 2 tabs on it, which you literally just pulled, you just ripped it, and you could open the box. You didn't have to deal with cutting any sellotape or any packing tape or anything like that. Also, the amount of customization you get in terms of like the paddles / buttons and the joysticks, I think is pretty hefty. I think like the only thing I would say is I wish there were an equal amount of each type of button. Like for instance, I'm gonna try and tilt this without everything pouring out. For instance, there's only 4 of these big boys, and then there's only 1 of these double paddles. I just wish there were like an equal amount, so if you're partial to one button, if you found one button easier to press, you then could equip that across the entire controller. Well, I hope there's like a reasoning behind that. I'm sure there is. To be fair, changing the buttons themselves is pretty easy. They're all magnetized, so you literally just pull it off, and then once it's off, you literally just pop it back on again. Getting it off is a little fiddly. And for people with little baby wrists like me, it's a little painful, but it's fairly easy, and especially getting them on is very easy. You also have, as I mentioned earlier, these little rubber buttons, and they basically fit into this little hole here on each paddle or button. I'm gonna just use that interchangeably. You basically just, whichever button you want to assign to the paddle, basically just pop it in there like that. The same principle applies to these rubber buttons as it did with the actual buttons, where they're easier to put on than they are to get off. They're a little bit fiddly, especially if like you struggle with like dexterity in your hands or anything like that. It's a little tricky. My only upside is that it seems to be the more I took out and put on the buttons, the like easier it became. And I don't know if that's just I've just worn down the rubber and now it's smoother to like put in. I'm not sure. Also on these buttons, see if the camera will show it. The writing or the symbol on them is actually raised, is tactile, which A is really good if you don't want to keep looking down at your controller. You can just feel what button it is there, and obviously it's a plus if you are visually impaired or blind. You can feel what key has been assigned to what button. However, that is great when it comes to like the traditional PlayStation symbols like the triangle and the square, etc. However, when it comes to the more complex symbols, I guess like L1 and L2, R1, R2, I feel like they're not raised enough, at least for me, to be able to tell what they are just from feel. So I feel like having them raised more would have been a plus. Because again, like X, I can tell that's an X, but R1, R2, I can't really feel it to tell what it is. So I feel like raising it a bit more would have been really, really good and really helpful. And here's the thing of like, if I'm playing a game and I'm trying to work out what key I'm hovering over, I can quickly tell like where the X is. I can quickly tell like, oh yes, I have in fact like keyed X to this button, but it's harder to do with like the L and R keys. On the controller itself, you have 10 buttons you can assign a key to. You have these 8 around the edge, and then you have a bigger one in the middle. And then I counted this as well. You also have like the traditional analog stick click. This will make more sense when I show you like setup and stuff, but you can also decide when setting up your controller which way you want it to face, like which way suits you best. This will make more sense when I'm talking about the actual setup of the controller, but you can also decide which way you want your controller to face. So for instance, do you want your analog click on the left, the bottom, the top? And I think that's really nice because I set up both my controllers facing different ways. So my left one, I had the analog stick on my left, and then the right one, I have the analog stick facing down. Another thing you can do when setting up is you can also assign buttons to be toggles instead of like react from pressing. So for instance, if I know a game is going to need R2 to run and I can't hold a button for a lengthy amount of time, I can set it actually in the PlayStation software so that R2 is now a toggle, and so I don't need to hold it. I can just toggle on and off. Because although I think it is becoming more popular for things like that, for buttons to be either toggles or holds, it is not across every game, and it certainly isn't in older games, so that's really nice to just be able to have that option within the PlayStation software itself. So you could use it to toggle like run on and off, aim on and off, and you just don't need to hold the button down. It's really handy. And it's really handy for me because again, I can't hold stuff for a long amount of time without pain. So being able to like toggle run on and off is a really good option in the game for me. There are also these 3 screw holes on the bottom, which you can use to either add extra inputs, so you can add extra inputs on the back here, or you can use it to fix it to a surface. However, no equipment comes with the controller to do that, so if you do want to fix it to a surface, you need to do that yourself, which is a little bit annoying. When I flip the controller upside down, you can probably see this little gap here, and that is because you can, in fact, adjust the analog stick of how far you want it away from the controller itself. So I have mine quite close, just because I'm trying to use both the analog stick and the controller at the same time. So I have mine quite close to the controller so that I'm not stretching my hands too much and causing myself pain. And it's just on a little lock system, so you can just push it, lock it, done. Or you could keep it unlocked and move it around as you're playing as needed. Like I said earlier, you can use up to 2 of the access controllers together, plus a DualSense controller. And there's sockets in the back, so you can include third-party inputs as well. So you could have 2 access controllers, a DualSense controller, and also extra third-party single inputs if you needed. Going to the setup of the controller, it was actually really easy, and I really struggle with tech. If you know me at all or kind of my streams, I really struggle with tech, and genuinely the setup of the controller was so freaking easy. All you have to do to pair it with your PlayStation is use the USB-C that came with the controller and plug it into your PlayStation, and then as soon as you start your PlayStation up, the PlayStation detects that it's there, and you are good to go and ready to set it up. I started with just setting up one controller first, and then I plugged in the second, but I don't think it matters. Do it in whatever order is best for you. It asks you to name the controller so you can identify it. I just kept to the default, but I'm sure you can give your controller a nice little beautiful name. And then from there, it literally walks you through each and every step of the setup and what you can do with the controller, and it was just so nice. It was just so straightforward. And again, I hate tech, so this was just so freaking nice. After that, you then get into setting up your actual profiles and options for your controller. And this is where you assign actions or keybinds to the buttons on the controller. Obviously, everyone is going to have their own way of setting up the controller, but obviously everyone is going to have their own way of wanting to set up and arrange their buttons. My thought process was keeping it similar enough to how the DualSense controller is, like the default, and making it similar enough that my muscle memory would pick up on that. From the get-go, I knew that I wanted to be able to use my whole hand or like my palm to move the analog sticks to decrease like pain in my fingers and hands and stuff as much as possible. So I also tried to make it so that I could reach all the main buttons with my hand like spread out and not reaching too much. And also the opposite, I didn't want to have to ball my hands up too much. I did change up the arrangement of my buttons a little bit as I played games just to go with what felt natural to me and what my muscle memory sort of lent to. Honestly, the only real difficulty I had with the setup was that when I did plug in the second controller, my PlayStation kept trying to apply the same profile to both controllers. So it would keep setting them both either to the right controller or it would keep setting them both to the left controller rather than two separate controllers. And it got to the point where I just had to keep restarting my PlayStation, and eventually it fixed itself and was fine. But I did sit there for 20 minutes, like going back and forth on profiles and going back and forth into the options and having to reset it and having to rename everything and redo everything and fiddle with options. So that was it, but it fixed itself, so it's fine. Or I fixed it accidentally, I don't know. After I had set up my controllers, I then decided to try it on a couple of games. I tried it out with God of War Ragnarok first because honestly, I hate to admit this, but I really struggled with this game when it first came out, and I was genuinely really sad about it because everybody talks about how good God of War Ragnarok is, and I wanted to join in with that, but I couldn't do the combat no matter what I did. I didn't have the reflexes for it. I didn't have the memory for it, and I couldn't remember all the combos. I couldn't remember the weapons. I couldn't hit the controls in the right order, and it was honestly just more frustrating than it was fun. And I do still have certain issues with God of War Ragnarok, and how I think it could be improved, but this controller made it such a much nicer experience this time around. I played for about an hour-ish and I managed to do the first few fights really easily. I changed a couple of settings to make it easier with the controller as I was adapting to it. So I like fiddled around with stuff like auto run and also like blocking, and obviously the combat does progressively get harder throughout the game, but even this was just so much easier than the first time around. And it might mean that I'm actually able to finish the game this time. I always tried it out with The Last of Us 1 remaster, mainly because that game relies so heavily on like L1, R1, L2, R2 as like the default controls within the game. And I wanted to see how easy it would be using those controls and where I had placed them on my access controller, because I placed them around this part, and so I just wanted to see how easy it would be for me using those controls in a game that relied so heavily on them. And honestly, it was a lot easier once I got used to it than I thought it would be. I thought I'd really struggle with like remembering where they are and like reaching them and stuff like that, but it was really comfy. And obviously I know you can remap controls, so I could have set like L2 and L1 to like something else, but I generally like keeping the default controls of a game so that I don't get confused. And so I just wanted to make sure that I would be able to use the left and right buttons as easily on this controller as I do on a normal controller. Although I did use both controllers, for me, I knew that I wanted primarily my controls on the left controller, and I just wanted to sort of use the right controller to control my camera and a little bit as a backup if I couldn't get to the controls on the left fast enough. I hope that made sense. My biggest hope for this controller was that I wanted to be able to use it on PC. And you can, sort of. Yeah, we'll get into it. I'm mostly a PC gamer. Because again, I struggle with traditional controllers, so PC it works for me, being able to use a mouse and keyboard. However, I have now noticed that I'm struggling to game with a keyboard. Mouse is fine. My right click's a little iffy here and there, but it's mostly the keyboard that causes me hand pain, like having to reach, having to pull up my fingers and stuff. And so my biggest wish for this controller was that I would be able to replace my keyboard with this. You sort of can. You sort of can. When you plug it into your PC, the PC does recognize it and it knows it's the access controller. You can go into your controller settings and it says access controller. However, there is no way to basically take like keyboard keybinds and add them onto the controller. It just is a controller like you would plug in any normal controller. However, because of that, obviously you can then only use it in PC games that recognize controllers, which Overwatch for me is my main go-to game. And I play with the Battle.net app, and I know you can use a controller on Overwatch through Battle.net. However, I tried a whole bunch of different stuff. I don't know if there's something I'm missing. There was no way I could get Overwatch to recognize the Axis controller as just like a normal controller. It couldn't do it. It didn't pick up any of the inputs I was doing, despite like me having controller binds in the settings in my Overwatch. It just didn't do it. So then I went to Steam to try it in Steam, and Steam did recognize it, and it did allow me to set up the controller. I didn't try it too. I want to replace my keyboard part and keep using my mouse. So that was like, my thought process was, if I can get this to work, that's amazing, it solved my problems. It was a little fiddly to set up and I just sort of sped through it. I am going to go back and take my time and set it up properly, but it worked. I had to mess around the settings a little bit, but it did work. I managed to like play a little bit of Cyberpunk 2077 with both the Axis controller and also my mouse. And that was incredible. That's literally exactly what I wanted. I wanted to be able to use both combined. I just wanted to replace my keyboard. That was it. And I did. And that literally just made my entire day. I'm so excited for this. So thank you, Steam, and your controller integration. That's wonderful. Thank you. So now that I've been through the whole me trying it out and the setup and all that, I want to talk about my personal thoughts on the controller. I'm going to start with the good stuff because there is a lot. So the pros of the controller. The amount of physical customization on the controller is wonderful. The amount of different types of buttons and analog sticks that come in the box are incredible. Again, like I said earlier, I do wish there was an even amount of each type of button. So that if you wanted to kit your entire controller out in one type, you will be able to, and not just have 4 of them and then like 4 of something else. Again, I do think the buttons are a little difficult to remove, but I do think putting them on is very easy, and the idea of doing it with a magnet was perfect. I love that you can set up different profiles for like different controllers and stuff. I love that. It means multiple people can use it. It means you can set up multiple profiles depending on what game you're playing. It's amazing. I love it, and it's really simple and easy, and I love that. And there's even a button on the controller itself to quickly switch between profiles. In my cons, I do go into how I found it difficult when playing games on the PlayStation. I couldn't just use one controller. I felt like I had to use 2. However, I do think there are ways around this. Because you can quickly switch between profiles with the click of a button, I do feel like you could just have 2 different profiles set up so that any buttons you don't have room to map on one controller completely, you could just switch between the 2 profiles very, very quickly during gameplay, and then you only need one controller. I know that won't work with my brain. And this is a more personal pro of the controller, more personal one for me. It did help my hand pain because I didn't have to ball up my hands. I didn't have to stretch my hands too much because of the customization of the analog stick and how you can move it in and out. It just made things so much easier, and because of the design of it, like it was so easy to move my hand around the controller, and it just like compared to using a mouse and keyboard was so much nicer. I used this for like 2 hours, and then I used the keyboard for about half an hour after that, and immediately as soon as I started using the keyboard I got hand pain, whereas I didn't get any of that with the hour of playing with the Access controller. So that was like a really nice positive for me. It was actually the first time I'd been able to game in months without hand pain. So yeah, that was just a really nice pro personally for me. Another pro, the ease of setting up the controller. I mentioned earlier I'm awful with tech, and like this was just so easy. It walked you through every point. It told you everything about the controller that you could possibly need to know during setup. It was just perfect. And I love that. And I wish more hardware came like that because I might actually understand computers. Okay, now on to the cons, the things I did not like about the controller. The hardest part I found in terms of like setting up the controller and customizing it for myself was the little rubber buttons. I just think they're so fiddly, and I just think that it could have been done a better way. And again, I wish the symbols were more raised. So they were more tactile. I think there was just, and like, how easy is this to lose? How easy is this to lose? If I move, these are gone. They're gone. They're out of here. So I do think that was an easy way. I love that you can customize each key. I love that. But I just think there was a better way of doing it than these little rubber things. Like if you do not have full dexterity of your hands, or if you experience hand pain, it's just really annoying and painful to be able to try and put them in and take them out again. However, I'm aware that like unless you are playing like 5 games a day, you'll probably at most be changing them like twice a day, if ever, because you'll probably keep them as is once you've like set up your profile for everything. I'm aware you won't be taking them off and on a lot, but it's just like the little things that matter. One of my other cons was that I wish it was easier to use with PC. I know, it's a PlayStation controller. I get it. They want to use a PlayStation. However, if you want to make things accessible for disabled gamers, a lot of disabled gamers use PCs because they are so customizable. And so I feel like being able to have a software or anything that would make setup easier for this with PC would be absolutely incredible. Again, it worked very well with Steam, but any games outside of Steam, it's like I said in Battle.net, I couldn't do it. Maybe there is. I tried looking up workarounds and stuff. I couldn't find anything, but maybe there is something out there that will make it easier to work with PC, either now or eventually. And again, the only other con I had was that I think it would be nice if I could definitely just use one controller with a game. However, it's very difficult because obviously 2 analog sticks, you need, one to move the camera and one to move your character. And so, if there's a game that has options to move the character with, so, if a game has options like moving the camera with your character, or even being able to like lock on your camera, anything like that, that's great. But if it doesn't have that option, you need both controllers, or you need a controller and then an Access controller, or you need an Access controller and a DualSense controller. You need something so you have multiple analog sticks, and that's just really annoying. So I wish this had maybe come with like 2 analog sticks. That would have been great. But that is just me being persnickety. I feel like there are workarounds with it, and so it's a very gentle negative. And before I finish up my video, I asked on Twitter and Instagram and socials and stuff if anybody had any questions they want me to answer, so I'm just going to go ahead and answer those questions. Someone asked, how does it feel when playing games compared to a standard controller? And my answer to that is like very, very different. It is very much like I was talking to my boyfriend about it, and I was saying that it feels again of like I'm learning to use a keyboard and mouse for the first time again, which I did in like 2015, 2016. It is like that. It's learning from scratch, more or less. But honestly, my muscle memory picked up on it pretty quickly. And I think because you can customize the layout, you can do stuff that works best for like your body and your brain, which is really handy. So I think even if you're not disabled, this might be just a nice addition to relaxing at your desk and playing games. Someone else asked, I know you don't play fighting games, but I'm genuinely curious to see how it holds up. I actually funnily enough, I used to play fighting games when I was at uni, and when I first saw this, when it was announced as like Project Leonardo, one of the first things I thought was, that looks like a fight stick. That was like one of the first things I thought, just because of the layout and stuff. On it, you could use this to play fighting games. Like it has like the joystick, left, right, you know, basics, and then you can just keybind all of your necessarily keys to this, and you're done. So I feel like for a fighting game, to the best of my knowledge, this would be so handy. And similarly, someone asked, how do you rate this with games that have a high response time requirement, like fighting games, Souls, or roguelike games, where precise timing is important? And I mean, the response time is the same as it is on like the DualSense controller or on a mouse and keyboard. Obviously, it is made with disabled gamers in mind. So I've only used it with like access options turned on when I was playing like God of War and stuff. But again, it is the same as any other controller. It's just made for disabled people in mind. So anyone can use it, and you can play any game you like with it. The only thing that I would say is, again, because it is a whole different layout than a normal controller or than a mouse and keyboard, it just might take some getting used to learn where you have mapped the keys to, and like programming your brain to know that. And then I got a couple of other questions, but I'm hoping that those ones I actually answered like throughout the video. If not, feel free to leave any questions below in the comments. I will do my very, very best to answer them. Literally any small question, I'll do my best to answer it. I really think this is a wonderful piece of tech, and I really just want people to have as much knowledge about it as they can if they're thinking of buying it. So I hope you found this review very useful. The controller comes out on the 6th of December, and it retails for $79.99 Great British pounds. I don't know why I said it like that. I'm also going to link some other people, some pals that also did reviews of the product, because disability is so varied. I say it all the time, it's so varied, and so like no one person can speak for every disabled person's experience. So like this, I reviewed this with my experience in mind as like a physically disabled person, and so I want people to have as much knowledge on this product as possible, and so I'll link some other reviews below, so feel free to check those out. And if you like this video, please give it a little like, a little subscribe maybe to my channel. I want to try and reach partner next year, so we're gonna see what happens. And if you don't already, follow me on socials and stuff. I don't know, I hate doing outros, it's really awkward. So I'm just gonna say thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time, and thank you for being so wonderful and watching, and yeah, leave any questions, comments, anything you think below, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!